Welcome to Health Matters, a podcast presented by Wellmark, Blue Cross, and Blue Shield, where we invite Wellmark experts to discuss healthcare and health insurance topics that matter most. I'm your host, Kareem Amiri. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Health Matters podcast. I'm honored and super excited to be here today on location in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to discuss a really important project, the 437 project. And today I have some fantastic guests joining me for this event that Wellmark is really proud to sponsor. And some of the folks I have here with me, I have John Meyer. I'm going to read this off so make sure I get it right. Executive Director of Leadership South Dakota. Janet Kittams, Chief Executive Officer of the Helpline Center, and Jennifer Mentley, President of Wellmark of South Dakota and Vice President of Sales and Retention. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.
So I know I've mentioned some of your titles, but I want to give you all an opportunity to talk a little bit more about your background and, why, some things about the event and why you're interested in it. And John, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to start with you.
Sure, you bet. So I grew up in Brookings. I'm a South Dakota kid. Grew up in Brookings, went to school in Iowa, started my career in Minneapolis. And then in 2009, I got a grant through the state of South Dakota to start my business. So I moved back home to South Dakota, became an entrepreneur. And I've been an entrepreneur for about 15 years. I've started 2 different creative agencies and sold those. And so today I actually kind of went full circle and I now coach entrepreneurs, creative agency founders who are in the person I used to be, starting and growing and trying to figure out what to do and how to wear all the hats and who to call when you need help on any business issues. So that's really fun. And then in addition to that, I took over just about 18 months ago a program called Leadership South Dakota. We have almost 500 alumni. Janet is alumni. I'm an alumni. And each year we take 40 leaders from across the state of South Dakota, all the corners, and we take them across South Dakota. So Pierre and Brookings and Rapid City, we go to the Native American reservation. And it's part learning about your state and meeting great leaders, but it's also learning about yourself and different leadership characteristics and how to push yourself and grow. And then in the end, you leave with 39 new best friends, which is really great. And so I took over that. It's an incredible program. And very much like this project, what I think is cool about it is we try to cover the whole state. We might be small in population, but we are pretty large in geography and probably more diverse than people assume, not just in like the topography or rural communities, big cities, but just our backgrounds. And I think that's what's so cool about the 437 project is not only do we have runners from across the state of South Dakota, but we are covering every inch from Wyoming to Iowa. So that's really cool. I'm a returning runner this year. I got to do it last year for the first time. And this year I'm back. I'm honored at Wellmark, Blue Cross, Blue Shield is one of my jersey sponsors, which will be great. And I'm ready to get after it here in a couple of weeks.
So what got you involved in the race or the event? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think last winter or so, I got an email from Mayor Paul Tenhaken about, hey, do you want to do the 437 project? We'd love to have you. And as any kind of messed up runner a person who trains and runs a lot, you're kind of like, oh, I wonder if I could do that. The physical challenge was really enticing to me of sort of checking that box and seeing, could I run across South Dakota?
And I read something about you. Challenges is a big thing. There's a word that you mentioned in your bio.
There's this concept called misogi. It's a Japanese word. And the idea is it's an event or something you put on your calendar that sort of defines the year. And so everything is moving up toward that. Like you work toward, it could be a day, it could be a couple of days, but it's this idea that it's not just that moment, it's the preparation and getting ready for that. And so I try to do one of those every year. I did this event in Utah called 29029, which is the equivalent of like hiking Mount Everest.
Okay.
You go up a ski mountain, take the gondola down 13 times. You have about 36 hours to do that.
Jeez.
There's this challenge called 75 Hard that's pretty popular on the internet. I did that challenge. And then doing this last year was really could I do that, right? This physical challenge. But what I tell people is, it really started as a physical challenge. I thought this is a good cause. I'll raise some money and the Helpline does great work. But after going on the project and hearing the stories and the stops that we heard along the way, I would say it really shifted from this physical challenge to this cause is so important. I felt like this is a good cause when I started and I ended with this is the cause and we need to talk about this. And I remember you told me actually I was so proud of how much money we raised and I was thinking we got to raise money. And as you said, it's really about the awareness, and telling people about the 988 number and being available and letting them know that there are other people out there for them. And so that's kind of why I'm back this year, is like, I wanted to continue to drive that cause forward. Hopefully we'll be able to do the physical part. I'm a little bit less trained this year, having done it once, but we got a good group of runners. It's not a race. You just got to get your miles done.
Yeah.
So,
well, now you got me pumped. I think I want to go out there and try it myself.
Yeah. I've had people in Sioux Falls ask me like, do you think I could do that? And I said, yeah, of course you could do that. Like, they say we typically, when we quit, when you think like we've hit our max or we're too tired, we usually are quitting at about 60% of our capacity. Yep. So it's usually our brain why we're quitting, not our body.
Yep.
And so, what a great tie to mental health right there. Like if you believe that you can do it, you usually can, because your brain will quit before your body will quit.
Speaking of the 988 line, that's a great segue to you, Janet, if you want to take your time here.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Helpline Center. Been there for over 26 years, the last 14 as the CEO. So I'm super passionate about the mission that we have at the Helpline Center, mental health awareness being one piece of that. And so that's what's kind of kept me at the Helpline Center for so long. Every day we reach out and we help people on their journey to recovery or their journey to receiving help. In the mental health perspective, it could be that individual. It could be somebody they're worried about, a family member, a friend. And so always looking for new ways to educate people, to get that awareness out there and know that there is somebody out there who cares, who wants to listen and is here to help them.
So great that you all are here and able to do that and be in that role. How did you get started in it originally? And then especially going into this 437 project, how did that get born?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of us who are in the mental health field are driven by a personal reason. So mine is personal. I grew up in a family where my mother suffered from a mental illness. And so at that time, when I was a child, I knew I wanted to get help for her and I wanted help for myself, but there wasn't any available. And so I kind of knew I wanted to go into that field. So I went to college, and that's what I majored in, was psychology, and got my master's degree in counseling so I could help others who may be in a similar situation. So I actually started working. I was a professional counselor, worked in a psychiatric hospital. And I can remember very distinctly, I worked the overnight shift and I got a phone call from somebody who was suicidal. And at that moment, I thought, okay, I'm glad that I'm here for them. But I did not receive any specific training to help this person who was suicidal. So I knew there was work that we needed to do in the field. So I actually started volunteering for the Helpline. That's how I got connected to them, answering calls in the evening and weekends. And I loved it, just loved helping people. So I eventually left my full-time job and started working my volunteer job full-time at the Helpline Center, and just have seen it grow and reach more people over that time.
Yeah, we were talking earlier just how people aren't aware of these resources, and I'm glad we're doing something today to help promote that. And I think that's a good segue to you, Jen, to talk about why you're here and some of the things that Wellmark's doing too, and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Jennifer Bentley, and I lead the Wellmark office here in South Dakota. And Janet, I didn't know that history. That's amazing. I absolutely love that history there. But how did Wellmark get involved here? I have loved this project, this event, since the minute I learned about it. And I caught wind of it early on, before it was really ready to go public. Wendy Johnson, who works with my husband, was able to share a little bit about this before it was ready for prime time. So she told me I need to connect with Mayor Paul. So I pestered Paul for a couple months until they were ready to talk to us. And at that time, he and Wendy came over to the Wellmark office, shared with us, and I think it was late 21 or early 22, if I remember right, shared with us what this event is about and what they envision. And quite honestly, the mission of this event aligned so closely with where Wellmark was going and what we were working towards. So we were in right away. We're in. I don't even need to know anymore. So, but what I really love about it is that it really encompasses the entire state, right? So often our events are in Sioux Falls or they're in Rapid City, but as a carrier, Wellmark has members throughout the entire state. So we love that it actually touches on the communities throughout the entire state, because that's where our members live, work, and play, right? And then even bigger than the event is the mission, right? I think both of you touched on that. Creating awareness. I mean, that is what we're trying to do here ultimately, and destigmatizing folks getting help and ultimately leading them to the resources that they need. So we've been working to create a more robust area or department within our walls as well. And I'll get into that later on. But I think we're lined up perfectly, and we've been involved since day one. So this is our third year, and we're excited to be here again. So thanks for having us.
It's pretty cool because usually, when you're trying to raise money for something, you have to go ask people and tell them the cause and explain. And you guys came to us and said, no, we want to do this.
Yeah, like Jen said, our podcasts that we've done, the Health Matters, we've spent at least 3 or 4 podcasts that are on mental health and different aspects of it. So yeah, this really fits in with what we're trying to do and help the community. If you want to talk a little bit more about the event, and I know it's September 19th it's starting. Do you want to, how we can raise a little bit more awareness for it and how people can support it?
Yeah, I'll let John talk from the runner perspective. I'll just talk from the kind of the overall perspective. But obviously, it's a journey across South Dakota. The 12 runners run Relay style across the state. From the back side of things, I get more involved with the support system, the logistics, and making sure we have everything available for the runners, that they're taken care of, and all of the volunteers that help with that run are taken care of. So lots of things going on in the background. But I think John said it best when he talked about when we stop in the different communities across the state. We always do a presentation. We have people share their personal story, and that is what is so inspirational, that people, one, are willing to be vulnerable and share that personal story, but it's so inspirational for the people in the audience to hear that and know that they're not alone, and it's okay to talk about these kinds of issues, whether that's struggling with depression, anxiety, suicide, PTSD, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and really that's part of what we've been trying to do, is remove that stigma of talking about this topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of the logistics, so we will gather on the 18th in Sioux Falls to head west to Rapids. Last year we actually went border to border, so like Wyoming border to Iowa border. Okay. And one thing I'm excited about this year is, I think it's appropriate that this is called the 437 Project, because as you know, since you probably were from those first meetings, it's very much a project. It's not like a company or like an established organ. It's like just volunteers and the Helpline Center, and we just kind of throw this thing together, which is cool. I like that part of it. It's like a startup. But because it was a project, we've had a lot of Sioux Falls runners because the people who started it were here. And so after doing it last year, I said, we got to stretch this thing across the state. So one thing I'm excited about this year, we have Rapid City, we have Phillip, we have Pierre, Platte, Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, I think Harrisburg. So like we've, spread it out. As a statewide run, it seems like we should have runners from across the state.
So were you actively recruiting runners, or were people reaching out?
And it's an interesting mix. Like I am not the fastest runner. And I would say there are other runners at the 12 that there are people out who are not doing this project that could run it faster than we could. But it's this interesting combination of, can you do the physical part? Can you raise some money and make awareness? But can you also speak to it? Because at these events, we have to talk about, and Janet's exactly right. You don't have to go far to find a personal connection to this topic. Some very, very close, and some, adjacent to family members or loved ones. So then Thursday morning, we will start. There's 12 runners. If you're familiar with the concept of like a Ragnar, it's kind of like that. Ragnar is like a relay race where people might go in a van, and there's a famous one I know in Washington that's called Hood to Coast, where they run from Mount Hood to the coast. Yeah. And it's just kind of this relay idea. I don't have to run 437 miles, thank God. But I'll run 40 miles ish over the 4 days. And so once you kind of run your leg, you go to the back of the line essentially and kind of go through. So there's 12 of us, about every 15 to 18 hours you run. And that honestly was the hardest part. I felt like last year was less of the miles and more of, what time of day is it? Like,
is it the middle of the day?
Because normally I don't run at 2 a.m. But I did 2 a.m. I did noon, I did 6 p.m. And we didn't have too many elements. We had some rain. We had a rainbow outside of Pier, which is pretty special right after we had our event. And that was pretty amazing. So you driving across our state, if you go to Rapid City, which I'm sure you do for work, like you hit that cruise at 80 plus and you just head on, and you don't realize the topography until you run it on your feet.
Sure.
It is more hilly than you realize.
Yeah, just a little incline can do a lot.
Exactly.
For our listeners, how can they support, between the time they listen to this, how can they support the event?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. We have amazing like corporate sponsors who help really drive the event, and then each runner's it has a little like donation page, and we try to raise funds. That's from family and friends, and anything from $50 to $437 if you want to do $1 a mile. So that's a big way to do it. All those funds go to Helpline. I'll let Janet talk about that. But even one of my favorite stories last year, we had a farmer drive by West River in his truck, and you don't normally see an RV. Like a truck with lights on, followed by a runner, by another truck, by an RV. That's probably not what you normally see in maybe Western South Dakota. And so he pulled over and he was asking us like, what is this? And we were telling him about it. He's like, well, that's cool. And then he drove away. And then about 10 minutes later, he drove back and he had a $20 bill and he just reached out of his truck. He's like, I want to support this. And he gave us a $20 bill. And I'm sure it made its way to you eventually.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. And it wasn't about the $20. It was about he probably went and told somebody about this thing that he saw, because we literally just run by these farms and these communities. And,
right.
And, maybe somebody now knows about the Helpline Center or the 988 number.
Yep. Yeah, the landing page for it is really great. So just saying the project and looking that up on Google, a lot of great ways to get involved that way.
Yeah, and I can talk just a little bit about like the funds that have been raised the past couple of years, how the Helpline Center has benefited from that. So certainly there's been a lot of money that's been raised, and we've dedicated the first year of those funds really to reaching out to those family and friends that have lost loved ones to suicide. Obviously, there's a lot of those folks in our state, and they don't know that the others exist. And so we wanted to be able to connect them and provide support from each other through that. And then we also wanted to provide more services to them, from support groups to education materials. So, and then we looked at how we could reach out and get more of those survivors connected. So what we've done is we're actually working on creating more support groups in different cities across South Dakota. We've created this amazing website that's specifically focused on grief and loss for those survivors to kind of use as a landing page that has resources. And then we also have this library of books that we list that are kind of specific grief recovery books when you've lost a loved one to suicide. So somebody can go on our website and they can pick up to 3 different books. We send those out free at no charge, and to help them in kind of that recovery process. So the first year we kind of focused on that, but we also brought in a national speaker. We brought in a speaker. She shared her story about recovering from a suicide attempt as a teenager. And so it was very, very powerful. And she created a documentary film about that. So it's called My Ascension. And so we were able to take that film and show it across South Dakota, whether that's in a school or a community center. And it created that conversation about suicide and awareness and how to get help. And then part of the conversation was a newer program called Hope Squads that is in like middle schools and high schools. And this speaker specifically referenced that. And so we were able, through a partnership with the Department of Health, to bring Hope Squad to South Dakota. And how 437 Project fits into that is those Hope Squad members are actually high school students who have been nominated by their peers to serve as support systems for other students. They needed T-shirts that identified them as Hope Squad members. And so the 437 funds, some of those have been used to support all those high school students across South Dakota that are Hope Squad members, so that they're easily identifiable. So if a student at a high school is struggling with anxiety, depression, or if a family member is, they know they can safely go to one of those students and talk about those issues. So the funds themselves have been just amazing opportunities for the Helpline Center to continue to grow and reach more people. But as John talked about earlier, is really the awareness. It's very, very cool when I travel across South Dakota now and I say where I work, that I'm the CEO at the Helpline Center. People know what the Helpline Center is. And I don't think they did before the 437 Project. They understand that the Helpline Center is there for them. And they know that if they have a struggle that they're dealing with, they can reach out for help. And that, to me, that is the most important thing, is letting people know that we're here for them.
That is fantastic. And all those resources, I was not aware of any of that. So thank you for bringing that up. And it's a good segue to talk about, for our listeners, what are resources for their employees that are available and that sort of thing. I don't know, Jen, if you wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, nearly every conversation that we have with employer groups this day and age touches on mental health, right? So if we even talk about the reports that we pull within the group space, I would say that 9 out of 10 employers actually see that mental health is in the top 3 to 5 diagnoses categories. So they're constantly looking for ways to help their employees maneuver and work through all of this. So that means that this is top of mind for Wellmark too. If that's what they're worried about, that's what we're worried about as well. Yep. So, and we know that it really boils down to access, right? And then normalizing the conversation. So what can we do to help our employer groups work through this situation? So at Wellmark, I would say after the pandemic, that's when everything really popped, and we knew where we needed to focus and where we needed to create, where we needed to really be more robust. So that's exactly what we did, is we've actually moved into a space where we're constantly adding to our behavioral and mental health resources. We actually brought on a psychiatrist, Dr. Matt Stanley, joined Wellmark just about a year ago. And so he's at the helm of building this out for us. So he has an entire team that really is specialized in this space. So we are moving forward in that space. So it's physicians, it's clinicians, social workers, all of the above that our members can actually help navigate the system, right? And one of the things that we pushed out recently was a conversation guide for employers, because part of it is the conversation and how do we have that conversation. So on top of that, employers can push their members to My Wellmark or wellmark.com, and they can go out and take a few different assessments, which will then connect them into some of our clinicians, case managers that can help them navigate the system. Where do I go next? Do I see my primary care practitioner? Do I go to a behavioral health specialist? Are they available? The access piece. Do we go to Doctors on Demand, which is a virtual option, and some people prefer it, but it's also there when the access isn't. So just a lot of things that we're working on to try and help our employer groups really work through everything. And
really those community resources as well, like the 988 line and others that you mentioned throughout both states.
Well, I think of when I was a small business owner, about 20 employees, you're so overwhelmed by all the hats you have to wear. And if you're a great leader, you care about your people, right? And so, I always tell entrepreneurs I coach, it's like, you don't have to be a bookkeeper. There are people that do that for you, because often that's the thing they dread the most. Like, I hate doing accounting, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? I'm not a mental health. I don't know. I'm not a healthcare expert. Like, we use Blue Cross, and I would say, like, hey, this is available. Let's bring someone in to tell you about these resources so that I can do what I do best, which is, grow this team, not also have to wear the hat of insurance and benefits and employee care, right? And so I think taking that load off and bringing those resources is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I mean, before we wrap up, is there any last things that you would like to mention about the project or resources within the community?
Sure. I think one resource that is available for everybody, no matter what state they live in, is they can call or text or chat 988 24 hours a day, and they'll be connected to a crisis center across whatever state they're in that can, provide a crisis counselor to be there for them. And I should mention that a lot of our calls are not necessarily individuals in crisis. A lot of our calls are people who are kind of at the beginning stages of recognizing they have symptoms of depression or anxiety, and they're reaching out for help. So I see that as really positive, because that means people are identifying it early on, and it's not getting to that crisis state, which is our goal, is that we don't want people to get to that crisis state. We want them to get the help that they need early on and prevent that from happening.
I'll tell you, I was just with an employer yesterday, and Jennifer talked about mental health claims being in the top 10. I mean, when I started with Wellmark, that was kind of a big thing, that it was just creeping into the top 10. Oh. Now it's top 3, top 5. For this employer, it was the number 1. Oh, wow. And usually when that happens, it means there's somebody that was an inpatient stay that, it got to that crisis point. Well, for them, it wasn't really that. It was just that people were utilizing services. So in a way that, it may have been number 1, but that, like you said, it was a positive from that perspective.
Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts. I think, the U.S. Surgeon General, I think, recently said that we have a loneliness epidemic in our country, and that was what he identified as the greatest health concern. And when I say that, I think mental health is the cause. I think one of the things that's so hard about it is we just don't see it, right? Like cancer can become so visible and it's rampant and it's a strong issue, of course. But mental health, we just don't see it. And I think that's the awareness and the normalizing there is so important, because just talking about it, I don't even know. I grew up in the 90s. Like, I don't know the first time I even knew the word mental health. It certainly wasn't in the 90s. It was later.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge part. And then the second part, I think what this project does so well is making the physical connection, connecting the dots between your physical health and your mental health. And so do you have to run across South Dakota to have good mental health? No, of course not. But you can go for a walk, and you can get outside, you can get fresh air, you can, get away from your screen and go sweat a little bit. Like, I just think it's such a strong connection, and a lot of science and data is coming out that it's the number one thing you can do is exercise.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really big one. And
gardening, getting out, doing whatever
it is. And so I think what I love about this project is how it connects those two dots. And maybe someone gets inspired. We even have on Sunday morning, the September 22nd, when we finish in Sioux Falls, there's a 4.37 mile run. So if you're not ready for 437, you can just do 4. And that's a really cool event too, because I think we want to make this a movement, and now more people can get involved. A few folks, Lisa from Mitchell, one of our runners, people kind of, when we were coming into Mitchell, they came and dropped off and ran with her. I don't know what the DOT thought about that, but we kind of were running in the highway into the community, and there was a huge welcome party. And so I think we just want people involved, whatever that means. Maybe you're in a different state, you're in Iowa, and you just want to run the same day that we run, right? I think thinking of it as a movement is something that I want to make sure people
and creating that community and that togetherness. Yeah. Like you said, don't be lonely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, absolutely love where you two went. And just to pile on top of that, for those looking for mental health support, obviously the helpline, get outside, get some fresh air, see your primary care practitioner, right? Or seek services from a behavioral health specialist. And we know that you could do that face-to-face. You could do that virtually through Doctors on Demand. And then, of course, Wellmark, some of the resources that I mentioned earlier online. We have assessments, so you can actually get in contact with some of those clinicians that can help you navigate. And maybe they're going to push them back to, the helpline, or push them to your practitioner, et cetera. And then last but not least, for folks to come out and support the event, like Janet, exactly what you said there. So remind us of the dates and the route.
Yeah, so we'll start on Thursday, the 19th. At the Wyoming border. The 3 events you probably need to care about, though, I guess actually Wednesday the 18th we'll be in Rapid City for a community kickoff event. I think the Hilton Garden Inn. We probably don't get to Pierre till Friday. I think our Friday event is in Pierre. Ramcota?
Nope, we're at the American Legion.
Okay, sorry, American Legion.
We're testing you.
I'm just working. I'm just running. And then
just a runner.
I know Saturday we'll be at the Court Palace, the world's only, in Mitchell. And then, of course, Sunday down at the Levitt in Sioux Falls. And so, there's almost these little mini events that just happen. I mean, we basically, if you know your South Dakota geography, kind of run along Highway 34, which is just like north of I-90, which is for safety reasons, but also it's just, you hit a lot of small little towns. Woonsocket loves us. We always stop in Woonsocket, the Muddy Cup, and they host it. So that's cool too, is now that
there's all these places I have to go to now.
Yeah, we went from this what is this thing, to then last year being like, oh yeah, I remember these guys, to now people are like, will you stop here? Like, I hope you stop here.
Yeah.
So who knows? I'm excited to see what this looks like in 10 more years.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and joining the Health Matters podcast. This is really, words don't describe how happy I am to be a part of this. But, for those of you listening, if you do have further questions, obviously reach out to some of the resources or look them up. But also you can reach out to your Wellmark account manager and we can get you in touch with whoever we need to.
Absolutely. So, Kareem, we're going to drag you here on the 22nd.
All right. All right.
If you can't be here, I know you can follow at the 437 Project, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So we'll be showing videos behind the scenes. I'll be representing Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, and so you can see what does it look like in the RV. You probably don't want to be there, but what does it look like?
And I think you have a partner we're sponsoring as well, right?
Yes, and Philip.
Carmen and Philip. Yeah, she I was out in Black Hills for a little family vacation, and I went by the exit there on the Phillip exit on I-90, and I looked down. I'm like, wow, when she runs, she just runs forever because it's just wide open in Phillip.
Yeah.
So she's one of those West River runners we have this year, which will be great. West
Coast also. All right. Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you want to continue the conversation about today's topic, please reach out to your Wellmark representative. And thank you for tuning in to Health Matters, a podcast presented by Wellmark, Blue Cross, and Blue Shield. Take care.